Good morning.
Good
Hey,
morning.
Commissioner Bondima. Well, I'm sorry, are there others on? I didn't even. Oh, there's so many people on.
Hey,
Good morning.
good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning?
Hold on, let me take this call. I'll be right back.
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Who was that? I think we are still waiting on Commissioner Reed. I'll give him another minute and we can get started.
We're gonna hear a little bit of machines at my house. They're cleaning up leaves, so I'm gonna put it on and off with the mute for a little bit till they get from in front of my door.
You-
Okay.
You're just fine, Commissioner Bondima. Thank you for the heads up, though. Let me send him a message. Okay.
Commissioner, who are we waiting for? Roberts,
Just
who?
Commissioner Reed. I'm gonna get started and he can join us.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
there is Commissioner Reed.
Okay.
And
Thank
we
you.
were talking about you. You're muted.
Hey, waities.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you this morning? Oh, okay.
Okay, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending the February 15th, 2022 operations meeting. Before we get started today, I would actually like to take a moment of silence for my daughter, Tyler Marie Long. Today, she would be 11 years old, and she would also have been a Baltimore City Public School student, but transitioned in 2011. So may you join me. I invite you to join me
Yes.
in a moment of silence.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're quite well. Bless her. Yes.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bondema. We can get started with the first presentation of today, the budget update. Good morning, Chief Dotery and Courtney.
Good morning.
Good day. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to get started with our budget update presentation for this month. If my slides cooperate. There we go. All right. So today we're going to be covering three things. So one is updates on the enrollment projections. Two is the community engagement feedback sessions that we just had last month, and some timeline updates. So to begin, last presentation, we spoke a bit about the enrollment projection process and where we were, and that we were putting the numerical projections together that we shared with schools for their feedback. We were able to take the feedback from schools, in some cases, and, I think I mentioned too that we don't take all the information. Sometimes, the number of schools asking for increases outweighs, what we see as the total projected amount, or, there's information that we have that, sort of contradicts some of the information that we get. So we do take what we can into account, but not everything. One of the adjustments that we did have to make this year was in terms of how we're funding our virtual learning or allocating the enrollment for our virtual learning programs. So we did have to make an adjustment after we sent out the initial projections to schools. What we have on screen is just the projection comparison, the total and the K-12 for what we're projecting for FY23 upcoming, which the total is 75,677, which is fairly close to where we ended up, FY22, so the 930 numbers of 75,384. So we're projecting fairly flat or fairly similar to the final. And you can see there it's also lower than what we had projected in the spring. Last year, and I think we said this at the time, it was a bit of uncertainty as to what our projections were going to look like sort of during and post, virtual learning, and how that was going to impact our projected enrollments at the start of last year, or what we came up with around this time last year. So we know we over projected last year based on what we ended up with in the fall. We're going closer to the fall actual projection now, anticipating that, the trend will be very similar for this upcoming year as it was for this year. Next, I'm going to talk about the community budget engagement sessions. So we had the 4 engagement sessions, and you can see in the corner of the flyer, we had the youth focus session on January 19th, the community partner session on January 20th, the general public session, and a multilingual session. And they were all pretty well attended. The youth focus session, we always do always over the last 3 or 4 years, a session focused on youth voice. And, it's usually very interactive. This year, we actually partnered with Arts Every Day, and it was a very arts-focused group. We had the students actually do some of the presentation for the community engagement to their peers and lead the conversations. We had an interactive activity where students participating in a budgeting exercise real time, and they got to see the results on screen. And access to the survey that everyone has an opportunity to respond to as well. So that went pretty well. The community partners meeting is the one that we tend to do in conjunction with PCAB, CCAC, and some of our other groups. And this year again, we had a partnership with PCAB. It was part of their regular meeting, so we had PCAB members attend as well as the other community partner groups that were invited. It was pretty well attended. We had a lot of robust conversation and feedback and dialogue. Folks were giving input on the priorities that were shared, and just general concerns or discussion that were useful for us to hear as we go through the budget process. So it was a pretty engaging partnership. The third was the general public meeting, and this one's always a little tricky because it doesn't target a specific group. So we don't have specific audiences that we're expecting to be there. It's general audience. So it was pretty well attended this year, considering that it wasn't targeted with a specific group. We had a lot of folks show up, and again, the engagement was very, very good. What we've seen, in the virtual format is that it does make it more accessible for folks. Like, it's easier for folks to attend these meetings, not have to worry about, travel arrangements or childcare or, other issues that would normally prevent them from attending in-person meetings. But the downside is that, it's historically been a little more challenging in the virtual settings to make sure that you're getting folks engaged, that, when they're attending the meetings, they're actually participating in the meeting. So we used an interactive survey, sort of a real-time survey. We had, more back and forth dialogue and discussions and Q&A in the presentation than what we had like last year, where it was more just us kind of like reading out the information. So I think that facilitated more of a conversation and more sort of participation real time. And also, subsequent to the meeting, kind of advocating for folks to go out to their friends and community members and other folks, to get them to participate in the survey online as well. And the last group was the multilingual group, which is, it's always a very, very interesting meeting. We did the meeting in, I think, 5 different languages. So we had English, French, Farsi, Swahili, Spanish. So we had translators, live translators during the meeting, translating what was being presented. We also broke out into work groups based on the different languages, where they went through the survey activity in their individual languages. We had some terrific help from the folks on Edwin's team in the Office of Community Engagement, and some of our translators that we work with in terms of making sure that the families are engaged. Even some of the prep work beforehand in terms of knowing who's going to attend, what sort of supports they're going to need. And it was a very close-knit meeting. I find that a lot of the families who attend, they know, a lot of the translators and the folks from the community engagement team. And they're always looking forward to these sorts of engagements, being a group that, wants to make sure that their voice is heard and they're able to share their thoughts with regards to the budget and the process. So all in all, I think we had some very engaging sessions. We did receive some good feedback, this year on the priorities. So speaking a little more of the priorities, and I discussed this in our last update, I think in December, where we're really making an effort to tie the priorities to a lot of the other conversations that we're having. So there are 6 priorities that we asked for feedback on. And that's different from the typical 25 to 30 or so. So it's a lot more streamlined and it's a lot more student focused. And it directly, the things that we chose are directly tied in to the work that we as a district have been doing with regards to R3 and the blueprint. So we've been trying to make the conversation a lot more seamless, a lot more coherent. We're not pulling priorities out of different areas or, out our left field. We can see how everything is related. And we presented it that way to the community members as well. We had the conversation as to how these things tie to the R3 and the blueprint initiatives, and that it's all part of one conversation. So the 6 things that we discussed and shared were on tutoring, extended learning, arts and enrichment, sports, mental health supports, and school culture and climate. And we did talk about those priority areas a bit, and we asked folks to rank in order of importance to them those 6 areas, and put them in the order that they felt was most pertinent for them, their families, their community members, etc. And like I said, we had some good dialogue and good engagement, good feedback on that. The survey is still open. We're going to leave it open for about another week to continue to solicit feedback. It's on the district website, and we've also sent out social media communiques on participation in the survey. So we're hoping to still get a few more responses on that as well. Next is an update on the budget development process timeline. So we had a meeting at the last public board meeting. We shared a bit on the Kerwin presentation and where the district is right now with regards to Kerwin. And one of the things that's impacted our timeline is some of the information that we've received or haven't received, based on how we normally would be getting information at this time of year. So typically, the second to third week of January, we have an idea of what our revenue picture is going to look like. Like we receive, the governor's budget and our local budget, our local appropriation is historically an MOE calculation, maintenance of effort calculation. So this year is a little bit different. Like we did receive the initial dollar amounts for the state, but there were still some question marks in terms of how it's applied. And as we know, Kerwin, it's unique in terms of how the dollars trickle down to the schools as well. So there's been some change in the application. And we've had questions and dialogue with MSD, with the state on how these funds should be placed, how they should be applied, what's being used to count the funds for the revenue. So there've been some conversations, and there've been some bits and pieces of information that we didn't receive up front. We've had to make requests for or have changes to. So because of that flow of information or lack thereof, it's put us a bit further behind where we would normally be in the schedule in terms of getting budgets out to school. We had initially anticipated sending school allocations out last week or at some point this week, but that timeline has changed. So tomorrow, we're going to be sharing with the schools what the updated timeline is, when they can expect to see their budget allocations. And as such, it's impacted a couple other things in the timeline. Collaboratives, for example, which would have been taking place now, had to be pushed back because we can't have the collaboratives until schools have their allocations, of course. The other thing that it impacts most pertinently is the school community meetings that they have prior to their budget sessions. And we had dates scheduled for those community meetings. And in those meetings, for the most part, the principals are sharing their budget allocations with their school communities and seeking feedback on their allocations. So without the allocations, they couldn't have those meetings. So they're going to have to reschedule a number of those. We'll update those dates on the district website as well once principals have those changed and scheduled. So we're just letting everyone know that, we're still proceeding, but the timeline has shifted back a little bit from where it was initially planned. And that was it. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation, Courtney. Commissioner Bondima, then Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for your presentation. I just have a few questions that you've probably heard some of us or one of us or myself asked before. And I'm sure that your chief probably has said, here she goes with the numbers. But when you're doing these surveys, I'm not looking at the complete document because I printed out the agenda, but I'm sure we have a document showing the numbers. It is really critical that we know when you do these surveys, how many participants do you have? How many participants do you have in the survey? I say this all the time. It's and you do an excellent job doing your surveys. It's just that it's critical for any person to observe or to read what you've done. It means not too much if you don't tell us how many people participated. And also, when you did one of your meetings that the board members set in, I think it was in December when it went to about 11 o'clock or something. Which meeting was that? When the community meetings and the community were able to participate in the meeting. I forgot which one that was, but parents, and they thought it was a COVID-19 meeting, but it wasn't.
Oh, the Parent Forum Convention of Bondima.
Yeah, that one. The next time you give a meeting, which I'm hoping you have as many participants, 5 minutes is too long for each participant to speak, unless you allow an organization or group participation. And when we ask the public to participate, the proper way is to have maybe 2 minutes, because that meeting went on to after 11 o'clock. We lost a lot of people. We kept a lot of our colleagues stayed on. I stayed on till it was over, but that was too much. But it was a good meeting. I'm not saying it wasn't a good meeting. So when you do these surveys and do these meetings, please allow them to only speak a limited amount of time, because what they were doing was repeating. So other than that, just make sure, please, that when you give these surveys, and you can send that to Christian to let us know how many participants were involved in the survey. Because when you do that, it could be 2 people or it could be 2,000. We really think it's important that we know how many participants were involved. But thank you very much. It was a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we still have the survey open, and we're going to keep it open for another like week and a half or so. But once we do close the survey, we'll share the results. It'll probably be, if timing permits, in our next operations committee update as well.
It'll be good also if you show the community leaders, businesses, organizations that participate in our survey. So we will know that we're reaching out to the outside of the district, to the community and businesses and other organizations.
The way we have the survey structured right now, or at least in terms of the responses that folks have to provide, they do provide some demographic information, their age information, what member or group they fall into within the community as regard to like whether they're a parent or a community member, et cetera.
Okay.
But it's not much more specific than that, and it is, anonymous. We don't, take, personal information on the survey, but we'll definitely share with you the details of what we're able to gather.
Yeah, because the council people, the legislatures asked you to allow the people to speak, but they don't mean to allow them to speak forever, So
Okay.
just put a limit on their presentation. Thank you very much.
Chief Doherty, did you want to offer something to Commissioner Bondima's remarks?
No, ma'am. I put my hand up to try to sneak in before the end of Courtney's presentation. So my comment is not directly responding to Commissioner Bondima's comments.
Okay, well, let me transition to Commissioner Reed and then come back.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, this is probably related to, you said Kerwin complicated. So I guess this gets back to, one of my questions. The way I look at the plan right now, it can only be a marketing plan until you know the numbers. But I guess for the benefit of this committee, is there some way that you have like parameters in terms of the numbers where this committee can say, okay, based on district in your department, you and Chief Dougherty's department, based on parameters of the numbers, this is what we plan to do with X, and this is what we plan to do with X plus certain number of million. I mean, does it help for us to have early look at your thinking, or does that make that complicates matters more? Because I mean, the way I look at the plan right now, for me, it's just a marketing plan until you get numbers, and then you get the numbers, it gets to be a financial plan. But I want to get to the financial plan part.
Yeah, I think we ourselves would have liked to have gotten to the financial part earlier too, and part of that is what I was discussing with the trickle of information or the late flow of some of the information, like numbers that we would have liked to have shared and been able to, share out. We didn't have fully fleshed out or received, in a timely manner. For example, our local allocation, which makes up a big chunk of the money that we receive, we didn't, have that number until Friday, just this past Friday. So some of that is really big stakes in terms of like how it impacts what the allocations can be and how the dollars trickle down to schools. What we can, share as of right now, is just some of the thinking, which, isn't much more detail than what we discussed on Tuesday, but in terms of the dollars having to follow the specific allocation path. So for foundation, compensatory, EL, pre-K, and SWD, which are the categories that have a school component, that 75% of those funds have to go to schools on a per pupil basis. So that makes up, a large portion of the actual allocation. So we've modeled what that looks like, and, we'll be, able to share some of that shortly. Like I said, some of the information we got on Friday, we're still building in, and there are implications for how, the model is applied that, we're working through internally, before we share it out.
Okay.
Chief
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. My comments will now be shorter because it was just what Commissioner Reed was touching on. And that was, although Mr. Desabey said exactly the situation, I was going to add in a more of a direct way that we only got the estimated local contribution, which jams up all of our planning and everything else. So on Friday, and to reinforce the scope, it wasn't a swing of just quote a few $1,000,000 up until we got the estimate from the state about what the local contribution is. There were swings in the 9 figures, right? That's 100 million, and that certainly bedevils any reasonable plans and planning that we have. Now, Courtney probably, I mean, it's generally good manners and good practice not to seem to be criticizing your biggest funder, the state, and we adhere to that. And the state knows that the districts, not just us, but the 24 jurisdiction in Maryland were really chomping at the bit to get these numbers. And even on Friday, when they put out the local contribution, the Baltimore City contribution, it had an asterisk by it. And it was the only asterisk in the whole sheet. And it said, this is still an estimate. And up until then, so there could still be swings. There are political things at play, but we took that number and we ran with it and have been running with it since. But I just wanted to reinforce, because especially Chair Roberts, likes us to emphasize things in plain English where appropriate, that because of Kerwin on the state end, they're only now just getting us information that in a quote normal year we would have had for several weeks. And we also don't want to appear remotely ungracious, because the local contribution amount is significantly higher than it was last year. So that is the whole crux of Kerwin as a funding source. So the very good news is the estimate now is significantly higher, but having just gotten it, like Commissioner Reed said, it was a marketing plan until you put numbers on it. So I just wanted to sneak that in, but Commissioner Reed's question said pretty much the same gist.
Commissioner Reed, did you have any additional thoughts?
Much appreciated. I guess another takeaway I have is the most important number you have is the most fluid number you have. 75%. It's like you said, it's 9 digits. It's not 2 digits or 5 digits. It's 9 digits. Okay, thank you.
Were you saying something, Chief? You were muted.
Just enthusiastic agreement with Commissioner Reed, because even a 6-figure swing with these numbers would be manageable, but to not know whether the $99 million that's been talked about is either in or not in, it just changes nearly any plans you might have. So we're continuing to work with what we have, especially with what came on Friday. And we just point out that even the state is citing the newness of Kerwin as some of the explanations for this.
Thank you so much. I just had 2 points. One, so Courtney, I did receive, as a mom of a 3rd grader, I did receive a text message asking about my budget priority focus areas. And that was the first time I had received that. So just wanted to highlight that during the presentation where appropriate, because that was super innovative. And was really helpful to me, even as a commissioner, to just be able to provide that information through text message. Something that I thought about at the last board meeting and in this presentation as well, with the implementation of universal pre-K, how does that potentially affect enrollment projections as we move forward? Does it really shift anything, or will we see any changes in like major increases for projections, or no?
At this point, we don't anticipate a major change, and then we project, well, one of the things statistically, and not to get too far into the weeds, there's always been a very low correlation between like pre-K enrollment and even K enrollment, and then some of the higher grades, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera. So a lot of our pre-K and kindergarten enrollment is projected based on prior year trends, not as much like birth rate information or capture percentage information like what we do for some of the other grades, or even grade progression ratios. And, so if this year in particular, we see a huge jump, then that could impact those trends, but we kind of blend them over a 3 or 4 year period. So we didn't build in any major changes for this particular year. It is something, like you pointed out, that we're going to look at kind of going forward, but we don't particularly have a reason at this point to think it's going to change significantly yet.
Got it. Chief?
Ma'am, One comment, quick comment, because I know we're probably at time, but to emphasize just how in flux things are on your pre-K comment, and Courtney, as the city's official blueprint coordinator, can correct me if I'm getting something wrong, but up until very recently, the pre-K was going to be for tier 1 pre-K, right? That it was going to be funded if a child, due to the family's wealth level, fell into tier 1. And then just the other day, there was apparently a change that took away the tier 1 qualification, and so it would fund any child that goes to a 4-year-old who goes to pre-K. And that's a whopper of a change. Now, it's a good change. We like the change. At the same time, it's that much flux is still happening where someone will put a rider in legislation and say, oh, by the way, it's no longer tier 1 kids for FY23. It's all 4-year-olds. So that's another reason why you might be seeing more asterisks in presentations we make to you, because they'll be still in flux, or the state just changed its rules or things like that. And we just point out that, on this one, it was a positive change, we think, and hopefully there'll be more positive changes, but it's still very much a moving target.
And Chief Daugherty, and again, I know we're in time, but this is such fruitful, like comprehensive, dense, ambiguous language information. We usually vote on the budget in April. And so the budget that we vote on moving forward, and you may not even have the answer to this at this point, will there still be, some ambiguous nature to the budget that we're potentially providing to the city council? Like, will we be concrete in stone in less than 8 weeks?
At this point, and I'll start and then Chief can jump in. At this point, the information that we have, we think is adequate to build the budgets. What we're working through right now in the most immediate future is the implications of that, like what it means at the individual school level. So how schools are going to experience those changes and what that means and how it's going to impact central office. But we feel fairly, I don't want to say absolute, but fairly, certain with the numbers that we have at this point. And at least the areas where there's still some uncertainty, we know what those are. One of the variances, or one of the things that's a little different with us, or why our timeline is sort of the way it is because we do that weighted funding model, and we do engage schools on building budgets. So other districts where they're doing staffing models, they're not really as concerned, based on the timing as we are at this point. They still have until July 1st to really figure out, where folks are going to go and where they're going to position them, especially when a lot of their allocations are, levied or predetermined or local, in different instances. So it's not as dependent on the revenue drop-down model as we are, and it's not as dependent on the principal feedback process and budget building process, which for us is an additional 3 weeks of the process. So, it makes it tighter for us time-wise on this end of things, and doesn't give us as much lead time for, the discussions and change management. But by the time we get to the board presentation, the budget should be fairly static at that point, or at least if there are areas of uncertainty, they should be very clearly defined.
I would agree with that, Madam Chair, to what Courtney said. I would also add that it's actually in its way quite helpful for us and the 23 other districts to be able to represent to MSDE very clearly in working level meetings. We need to know the answer to this because we're putting this in our budget and bringing it to our board. And MSDE does respond to that. In other words, they know there are places where there's ambiguity, sometimes intentional, sometimes unintentional. But when we go back to them, we say, this is now getting extremely real. We're putting in a formal document of $1 billion+ to our board. We can't not know the answer to A, B, and C. And then wherever possible, they will say, here's our interpretation of A, B, and C. And where there is any remaining ambiguity, we'll actually highlight it for you, like this example of the last minute change in pre-K from tier 1 to everybody. We think we probably got that in enough time that that'll be a non-issue. But if there are any others, we'll certainly point them out so that it doesn't slip by, unintentionally slip by in the rather packed budget process. And I think we introduced the budget to you in April, and you typically vote on it in May, and that's consistent this year. The final board vote is May 10th, and the first presentation is April 26th, I think.
Got it. Thank you so much. It's just something that bubbled up as we were talking about it. You know, we're almost in March.
Yes, we are.
And so
helping,
it's a really fast timeline.
It's helping focus the mind quite a bit for us.
I can imagine. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. We can transition to the staff wellness presentation.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Sarah Deal. I'm the interim Chief Human Capital Officer. And joining us today is Charles Hall, who's the Director of Employee Engagement, who will be sharing an update with you around staff wellness. Charles?
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to just start off with the agenda for this morning. Of course, the priority that we have matched this with is priority 5. And just want to go through the agenda with you, and then we'll get straight into the presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about vaccination and booster clinics, and then we're going to discuss COVID response, the contact tracing and testing that we've been doing in the district. And then we're going to segue into our targeted wellness initiatives that we've done, as well as health and wellness supports that we currently provide to our employees. One of the things that we've been cognizant of, especially over the last 2 years, is that we have to be more focused on how we are addressing wellness, especially during this time period. We recognize that we're dealing with 2 traumas. One is the trauma of the COVID pandemic, and then the second is the trauma from the pandemic. And so where we're going to start today is first with vaccinations and boosters. We'll talk about the trauma of the pandemic. Just so that you'll know, we, as part of our vaccination clinics, we were able to partner, next slide, please, with Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, BCC, and others to provide vaccinations to our employees. And we started that endeavor in February of 2021. This was one of the many mitigation strategies that we used to address the pandemic that, of course, we all know we've been dealing with. You'll see here a couple of numbers. Some of these numbers are outdated and we need to update, but these are the most recent numbers that we know that we have that are concrete. And so the total number of employees who participated in the vaccination clinics is there, 6,964. And then when we look at the fully vaccinated principals and teachers who make up the majority of our school-based staff, you see here a relatively high percentage of principals and teachers who are at this juncture fully vaccinated. In addition to providing the vaccination clinics, we've also sponsored and continue to sponsor several booster clinics that are available for our employees to participate in. And we are grateful for the fact that persons continue to show up to participate in those booster clinics. Next slide, please. In addition to our vaccination and booster clinics, we instituted and continue to have a very robust COVID response effort in place, which consists of both contact tracing and the testing. First, just to start with the contact tracing, the team is tasked with making sure that several things occur. Number one, they conduct intake interviews for all positive COVID cases. They're providing information to leave, or in reference, to leave for all persons, whether they are the individual who's contracted COVID or they're a close contact. Keep in mind that if you're fully vaccinated and you're not symptomatic, you do not have to quarantine, and so you can continue to report to work. Therefore, there is not a leave option that you need to worry about. In addition to speaking with the positive persons and close contacts, our contact tracing team also communicates with the supervisors so that the supervisor is aware of any positive cases that have occurred outside of school that they may not have been aware of. Additionally, they're aware of the leave time that would take place, as well as return to work dates for persons. The contact tracing team also will obtain information as needed for close contacts. Again, what we want to make sure that we do is we want to make sure that we have as robust an approach to mitigating transmission as possible. So we do collect close contact information when necessary so that we can inform those persons that they were close contact. And if they are fully vaccinated, they are informed they can continue to report as long as they are not symptomatic. If they are unvaccinated, then they are instructed to quarantine for a 5-day period. In addition to those steps that they take, our contact tracing team, which is led now by Nick Smith and under the direction of Executive Director Cleo Hirsch, they also worked to make sure that they continue to update what we have in place to track all COVID cases. So we have a COVID intake tracker that the team daily enters information into as it relates to positive cases. This tracker actually feeds into the public COVID dashboard that you'll find on our website. So when there are positive cases in our schools that are reported to us, those cases are entered into the intake tracker, and then subsequently they are posted to the dashboard that persons can see and visit on the website for Baltimore City Schools. Additionally, when we collect and gather information on positive cases, we share that information with the Baltimore City Health Department. And so on a daily basis, Nick is sending over to the Baltimore City Health Department a report that has all positive cases in it. And he also works with them in cases where there's an outbreak in a school. If there are 3 cases that can be linked in a classroom or multiple cases in a school that we can link, then it is considered by the state to be an outbreak, and Nick would have a conversation with the Baltimore City Health Department and all school leaders who have outbreaks in their schools so that they're aware of the proper next steps to take, and that information will be reported on the state's outbreak dashboard. And then, of course, we continue to have our asymptomatic and symptomatic testing in our school locations as well as at district office. And so, as you know, we've been doing pool tests, asymptomatic testing, and then if a student is symptomatic in a school, they are able to go to the health suite and to be tested there, and then they are sent home for the remainder of the day. I want to talk to you a little bit about the collaborative and group efforts we're doing as it relates to wellness. And this now deals with the impact from the trauma that we all are trying to deal with as it relates to moving forward after COVID has impacted us for these last 2 years. So, as you may know, in place, we have a Be Well Employee Wellness Program. With that program, we have 2 dedicated wellness educators, one from Care First and one from Kaiser, who actually lead this initiative for the district. They are full-time, they sit in human capital, and we work directly with them to implement all of these initiatives that we'll talk about today. One of the things that we do on a monthly basis is we meet with the Joint Health Committee, which is made up of representatives from each of the unions, and we meet to really discuss any health and wellness concerns that they are informed of or that they're aware of, that we can collaborate together to sort of formulate solutions to address. We want to make sure that we're hearing from our union representatives because they are a good source of information as it relates to our employees, because sometimes an employee will go to the union before it will inform those of us in human capital or their supervisor. And so this is a way for us to continue to collaborate with union representatives and to design initiatives and efforts to ensure that we're addressing the concerns of our employees. In addition to that, what our wellness educators have done is they've made sure that as new hires come into the district, we initially and intentionally introduce them to the Be Well program, which is our employee wellness program. We want to make sure that as they're coming in the door, that they understand that City Schools places a priority on their well-being. It's not just about the work that they'll do, it's also about the people they are. And we want to make sure that they're aware of that coming into the door. Additionally, what we've done is the last several years, we have actually hosted a holiday challenge where we will challenge or encourage persons to participate in an endeavor that we do that focuses on what we know people tend to deal with as it relates to the holiday season. So when it comes to eating habits, when it comes to stress, when it comes to monitoring one's mental health, we know that typically during the holiday season, we see a higher than normal rate of depression. We also see an increase in suicide during that season. And so we want to make sure that we address those realities so the persons have the resources they need to get through that. Next slide, please. In addition to our collaborative and group efforts, we've also started implementing some more individualized efforts, and you will see those on the screen here. One of the things that we are doing this year is we're rolling out a pilot program for 18 schools and for district office. And this program is going to actually allow us to focus on the wellness and the health needs of individuals in these 18 schools and a district office in a unique way. Because instead of creating a cookie cutter approach, we're going to learn what are the needs of the school-based staff in these 18 schools and in district office that we can address and design the program around those. What this will do is it will meet the unique needs of the persons in those schools and at district office. In addition to doing that, we also have persons sign up for our monthly wellness challenges and our monthly newsletter. This allows for persons to, on a monthly basis, in addition to the information they receive through the Inside Scoop, to get access to wellness resources, wellness information that they can use on a monthly basis, not just for themselves, but for their coworkers and their families as well. In an attempt to ensure that we also educate our employees as it relates to health and wellness, we sponsored 2 health and wellness fairs during the open enrollment period last year. And we used this time to educate them not only on physical wellness, but also financial wellness, mental wellness. We had a Kala meditation van. We had seated massages. We had flu shots that were available for them. And during that period, they were also allowed to spend some time with our wellness educators and speak with them concerning their own personal health, concerning their benefits through Care First and Kaiser, and to learn about other wellness initiatives that we are embarking on here at City Schools. Next slide, please. We have a few new initiatives that I want to highlight, and the first one is that we have already hosted one Wellness Wednesday, and we'll host another one in March. And during that time, what actually occurs is after our district office staffing meeting, our wellness educators sponsor moments where people can attend sessions with our vendors, they can attend smoothie demos. We had a squat challenge in the last one, and we had blood pressure screenings. We also had on site, and we'll have them on site again, our Burnalong staff, which I'll talk about in a little while. And we had the Great Kids Farm show up, and they distributed spices, flowers. Also, they were available with the food truck that the Great Kids Farm has. In addition to that, this year we look to expand on our Be Well program. And what we're going to do is take a more targeted approach. As we've said, we recognize that we want to make sure that we are targeting the health issues, the wellness concerns that our employees have. And using claims data, we're actually able to see what areas we need to target. We know that in the last 6 months or so, we've seen a dramatic increase in virtual visits. We've seen a dramatic increase in mental health visits. For Care First, for example, in the last 6 months, virtual visits, there were 2,981 of them, and a little over 70% were related to mental health concerns or matters. With Beacon, our EAP provider, 288 employees actually scheduled individual counseling sessions, and 607 persons, the 288 employees had in person. There were 607 persons who scheduled telehealth counseling sessions with Beacon, and the top 5 reasons for those were stress, anxiety, situational matters, depression, or job and occupational issues that they were dealing with. And so we want to make sure that we can continue to look at the claims data and through the Be Better campaign, actually address those areas so that we can target the top 5 and assist our employees in a better fashion. In addition to that, we've also renovated and continue to renovate and furnish the cafe, which is at district office. And even as recent as yesterday, additional furnishings were added to the cafe. There's a TV in there now. There's some bulletin boards. We also have a blood pressure machine in that room. And we've purchased several blood pressure machines to actually travel throughout the district at different schools so that we can encourage persons to not only be aware of their blood pressure, but also to be more educated about where it should be and how they can keep track of those areas. The last thing I want to talk about are our, I just mentioned, our blood pressure campaign. We're also taking inventory of our heart health and breast cancer campaigns, of course. And because we know that we've seen an increase in the mental health claims and mental health area issues in our staff, we're implementing wellness check and mindful moment office hours with our wellness educators. And so there will be times when they will be able to do either in-person or virtual mindful moments. We'll have times when, if it's virtual, we'll have breakout rooms where a representative from Beacon or Care First or Kaiser will be present to assist persons, because we know that they may have matters that they don't want to discuss in the open. And we also are going to make sure that we identify wellness champions at each school, as well as district office, to help be ambassadors, if you will, of the wellness work that we seek to do here in city schools. And then finally, we have a couple of initiatives that we've already implemented through our medical providers, Care First, Kaiser, and Beacon. Again, just to mention that we have expanded our telemedicine services with Care First and Kaiser. Beacon has seen and experienced an increase in their counseling endeavors, and they've also recently set up a unique website just for the employees of city schools, which is called Achieve Solutions. And we've also implemented an initiative through Burnalong, which is a free app that our employees have access to. We implemented that in June of 2021. And since that time, 1,542 employees have enrolled and 35 families have created accounts, just so that you'll understand what that means. Each employee can have their own account, and then they have access to 4 additional accounts that they can share with family members or friends, and those persons can sign up and participate in Burnalong as well, and it's all free. All they have to do is download the app. The app provides a plethora of classes and sessions that they have access to. As you see, there are over 13,000 live sessions and on-demand classes, and it has a variety of categories. So it's not, again, just about physical health and wellness. It's also about mental, it's also about financial, and offers classes for kids as well. Burnalong will be on site shortly this year, and they'll be actually, I think it may be this week or next week, where they'll be hosting a Zumba class on site at district office in the boardroom. And that concludes my presentation on staff well-being.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions and comments. Commissioner Bondima?
I don't actually have a question right now. It was a very excellent presentation.
Okay, Commissioner Reed?
Yeah. I mean, do you guys have any glitches or pushback in terms of testing activity that we could know about or be conversant about?
As you mean the COVID testing?
Yes. I mean, I'm just trying to get educated from the standpoint of, I never see what happens in the back room in terms of what people do, but I was just just, any concerns people have in terms of unwillingness to take tests, testing information, are there enough sites, whatever glitches or problems you guys see that the board should know about.
I'm happy to jump in if that's helpful.
Yes.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
So in terms of COVID testing, I don't know that we have any glitches of the kind that you're referring to. We have been very happy to see. I just got off my call with the health department, which is why I was late for this meeting. We have a weekly check-in, and seeing that our data, the city's data in terms of positivity rates is significantly lower than it was, as well as our own. So I think the city's at 1.3%, and I think the state is at 3.8%. So the city is well below the state, and then we're well below them. So I don't have the exact, I can't remember the exact numbers, Commissioner Reed, but I think our positivity rate or our prevalence rate in elementary schools is maybe 0.4%, and then in high school something like 0.6%. So we're as we have consistently been throughout the pandemic, well below the city. We also have very high participation rates. We do. We have been, we've been testing about 50,000 people each week. And so we don't really have the glitches you're talking about. I think we're really pleased to have gotten past the really, it was challenging, as you know, during the Omicron, the real peak of the Omicron, the highest peak of that, where we were having so many positive results that we had to follow up and do individual testing on. So that was definitely very challenging for our system, because it just was the volume of it, the change, just like you saw in hospitals. It was such a stark rise and then a stark drop that presented a challenge. But currently I think it's going really well, and we're seeing some of the lowest prevalence rates we've seen right now, so which is great. And while I'm talking COVID and COVID response, I just want to give a quick shout out to Charles Hall, who talked about the contact tracing work that he led on top of his day job. So a lot of us during COVID have had to take on responsibilities that were not our day job, and some of them really large. And so contact tracing was a huge responsibility that he and his team took on top of their regular work. And so we have now created this COVID response office. It probably took us too long to figure out that we were really asking too much of the individuals we were asking to do this on top of their regular job. So I wanted to just thank Charles for his work leading that, and during what was really a challenging period and a long period of time, he had to do that on top of everything else.
So how does the public know that the school system has done better than the city, which has done better than the state in terms of testing and positivity? Does the public know, and how can we best let them know that?
I mean, it's in we do have our dashboard up. The health department's dashboard has not been up for, since the early December, because there was that cyber attack on the state. And so their dashboard that gives that positivity rate that I just gave you for the city, that has not been up since early December. So it's hard to make that comparison. We do often include it in our communications, the fact that our schools are safe and are safer, have consistently had lower positivity than the city at large. And so in our communications, in Sonia's talking points and my talking points, we do often talk about it. But there has been that technical challenge right now. The comparison is difficult. I only know the positivity rate because I just got off the phone with the health department, but it's hard. You can get it from the state's website, but it's a little harder to get that comparison right now.
Thank you.
I actually have a few questions, but first and foremost, thank you so much for the presentation. My first question would be around, as a result of rolling out the resources and staff, is there a bottom line to this is how staff is doing? I don't know if I particularly feel a pulse, and I think that was kind of one of my expectations of going into this presentation, of where staff is with the implementation and understanding the huge capacity of rolling out these resources and services. I don't know if I get how staff is doing. And I think what could have helped me here is if I had seen some employee survey data or responses from staff. So if somebody could speak to that. Also, my second question would be around, was there any type of analysis done outside of the claims data from the insurance companies taking place to identify and remedy non-COVID-19 related matters? And I think that's also an area where we could have seen some survey data and responses from staff. And then, Mr. Hall, you had mentioned, and it was in the presentation around like the holiday challenge, the heart health and breast cancer. Do we have any staff or employee feedback from those initiatives? And also, I wanted, to highlight the claims data used, but what are some ways that the district is planning to address some of those targeted concerns? And overall, I think just what I was looking to see was how the district could keep staff like yourself happy, healthy, supported, and engaged in this work. And so I think it's some really great things, but I'm looking really for the bigger picture of, okay, we're doing that. We saw these issues, staff shared these things with us. We're going to address them. And now as a result of staff is feeling X kind of a way. And I don't know if I saw that story being told here today.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think one of the challenges that we've had in the last couple of months is the transition that we've experienced. So initially we were, virtual for so long that it was hard to get a pulse of how employees were feeling about working in the school. And now that we've come back, we're starting to get that information. So what our wellness educators have been doing is actually they've been deployed and going to schools to get that information. So it's still relatively early for us to have a full picture of where staff are, because we, we're back in school, but it's been challenging to know exactly how many times should we be in school, the extent to which we should be in school. We have done some surveys, and to be quite honest, we don't get the best responses when it comes to surveys as relates to their health and their wellness, because everyone is not aware that it's not going to get out. People are always fearful that maybe their name is attached. So those sorts of things are not as easy to capture in a survey, which is why our wellness educators are being more intentional about having a physical presence in schools. And what we should be able to capture through the remainder of the year is what is the pulse, the true pulse of staff now that they are back in schools on a regular basis. But that was hard to capture when we were virtual for so long.
That's totally understandable. Ms. Dill, you popped on?
Can I add just one quick piece to that is just to remind Commissioner Roberts that there is also a presentation coming to the board on Tuesday that has a lot of survey response data from surveys we've done of staff, families, and students. And so it doesn't have all, like to Charles's point, we don't have maybe all the wellness information you wanted, but it does have some information about how staff are feeling. So that just look forward to that presentation on Tuesday.
Got it. And it's just to know it can live here too. Commissioner Bondi, but thank you, Allison.
The question that I would thank you, and Allison, the question that I was going to ask, and since you guys spoke before me, you've answered some of that question. Allison, you said that 1.3% Baltimore City and 3.8% for the state. How do we get that information, like what you said? Because I was really pleased and excited about what you just said. But how do we get that communications out to the community? Because I did not know, or did this number just come up today? And when you were on the phone, they told you this? Is this what happened?
It just came out today, and the city sometimes has been higher than the state. That's not always been consistent. There's been ebbs and flows in that in terms of whether the city was higher or the state was higher. During Omicron, there was a period where the city was higher than the state.
Right.
So I was pleased to hear that result today as well. And then, as I said, we have consistently, even when we were high, we have. I don't think it's ever been true that we have not been lower than the state. Maybe there was a little time when we weren't, but generally the state, then the city, we've always been lower than the city in our schools. And so, it is, again, we love We welcome advice about how to get it out more, and we talk about it a lot. The fact that our schools are, the positivity rate is low. And so we can certainly try to get that out in different ways. It's often in our talking points, it's often in our communications, because it has been true consistently throughout the pandemic.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reed?
Just one question. Mindful moment office hours. Tell me about this kumbaya stuff.
So to Commissioner Roberts' point, we want to make sure that we provide some initiatives where persons have access to more than just the telemedicine. So as our wellness educators begin to establish relationships with staff, they'll be on the Mindful Moments office hours to speak with persons individually, and we'll have we'll have some breakout rooms. So let's say you're feeling stressed that day, you want to talk to someone about it. We'll have counselors available where you can be in a private virtual room, talk to someone about it, have them, sort of walk you through whether it's breathing exercises or just allow you to vent for a few moments. What we've found is that when people are able to talk through what they're experiencing, it does help them manage their stress a little bit better. It does help them manage their wellness and their blood pressure a little bit better. So we want to make sure that we provide as many opportunities as possible to people while they're at work as well as while they're at home for them to access those resources.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hall, I think this is a really good baseline of, once we fully integrated back into buildings for staff and for students. I think in moving forward for future presentations, it'd be really helpful to see some of that analysis that your health educators are bringing back, as well as with the claims information to kind of set the stage for, okay, these are some of the issues we saw. These are our interventions that we're kind of rolling out. And this is the feedback we're getting from that. We might need to steer the ship here because it's not working, or it is working, so we need to scale these efforts. I know that would be really helpful for the board, especially being in the climate of the Great Resignation and, people really reconsidering their career choices and what that means in a world of, the implementation of Kerwin and onboarding new staff, and just generally understanding how the staff is feeling. So just wanted to offer that. Thank you for the presentation. It was a lovely presentation. Just in moving forward, I think that would be a really good frame of offering that storytelling in a way. I don't think my colleagues have anything else to offer. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
We can now transition to our procurement agenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Commissioner Roberts, Commissioner Bondima, Commissioner Reed. We have 3 items today on the procurement agenda. The first of those are the Chief Financial Officer requests the board's approval to increase the contract with Dillard Research and Applied Data, Inc. from $49,875 to $98,125, which is an increase of $48,250 to continue to improve Kerwin legislation implementation and support. The contract term began August 31st, 2021 and ends August 30th, 2022.
I just have one question, if Chief Daughtery or Coordinator is still on. If they could just kind of help us see that full picture of what this company does. Do they facilitate the convening of the cross-functional meetings that take place for the implementation of Kerwin, Chief?
Thank you, Madam Chair. They do a little bit of that, but their main raison d'etre for us is helping us build and manipulate a brand new model to incorporate Kerwin. As you know, the models that we've had, the actual physical computer models that we've had were fair student funding based and developed over time and quite well suited to the task that they were built for. But the Kerwin funding changes everything. And so these external consultants, and Mr. Coleman mentioned that their name has analysis and data in them. They're used to big complex models, and that's the main reason. They will participate in meetings that Courtney runs and that I'm in, but it's more so they hear what the leaders of the work, the pre-K and the CCR people have to say, because that informs their thinking. But I think first and foremost, they're computer modelers.
Got it. Commissioner Bondima, any questions for Chief Dr. Courtney on this procurement?
Thank you. I did have a question, but he answered. I got an answer. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Commissioner Reed?
I'm fine, thank you.
Got it. Thank you so much. Mr. Coleman, we can go forward.
Okay, our second item is SaaS Software Customer Care Support Contract. The Chief Financial Officer requests the board's approval to increase the contract with SaaS Institute, Inc. from $36,912.50 to $85,600.50, an increase of $48,688 to install SaaS 9.4 data management software and additional programming services. The contract term began October 29, 2021 and ends October 14, 2022.
Commissioner Bondima?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Reed?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. And I too don't have any questions. We can move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Our last item for consideration is tennis court and running track maintenance and repair services, American Tennis Court, Inc. Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval for a competitive solicited contract with American Tennis Courts, Inc. to provide tennis courts and running track maintenance and repair services at various Baltimore City Public School buildings on an as-needed basis. The estimated amount of the annual contract is $1,500,000. The contract term is February 23rd, 2022 through February 22nd, 2025, with 1 2-year renewal option.
Commissioner Bondima, I saw your hand up and then you.
Then I put it down because my original question, we have a tennis court in every single high school. Is that correct? Every single high school has a tennis court. And
who does that?
is that
Mr. Lipsky?
Yes, this is Blaine Lipsky. Yes, except for Reach. Reach does not. They were at Lake Clifton, but they're the only one that does not at this time.
okay? I just wanted to know. I thought that we did. We don't have them in middle schools. I don't think. Maybe we do. I don't know.
No.
But is this the okay? I'm good because I've looked at some of the tennis courts at some of the high schools and they really need repairing. So I'm all with this. So they need upgrading. So thank you. I'm good.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed?
Hi, Blaine, how are you? I guess my question is, it's $1.5 million, open-ended. Do we have like a sheet, operational plan, or something that says this school needs it now and this school needs it next week? I mean, because it's open-ended. It's like, hey, you got $1.5 million. We haven't, I mean, I don't see anything in terms of what schools need it, the pecking order for the schools, for the track, for the facility, the gym or whatever. But I guess the thing is, this is basically hard stuff like tracks and tennis courts, but it's nothing in terms of, do you guys have like data for us? Or, an action plan for us that we can look at and say, hey, we expected to spend down 750,000 this year, and the other 750,000 is going to be open? I mean, I see nothing but an ask for $1.5 million.
Right. Well, the ask is for that's correct. The ask is in the event that we have a project that's comes to us through either a council person or through the CEO's office or our need. Right now, take for example, over at City College, the 3rd and 4th lane on the outer east wall has collapsed, and we have started doing the rebuilding under the former contract to rebuild that. And when the weather gets nice, we'll be putting the asphalt overcoat over that. But for the most part, for tracks, we do a regular walkthrough to determine with the athletic department what lanes need to be revitalized and such. For the most part, the costs are minor to do the resurfacing and repainting. However, take for example the Edmondson track that needs a complete tear out and redesign. That we're looking for funding for that. That's over $1.5 million that we're trying to identify later on. But we could provide you things. We do have School Dude that offers some guidance to us, but for the most part, it's through the athletic directors and the actual athletic director on site that provides us better guidance and more up-to-date information prior to our actual walkthrough.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is when I see stuff from 21st Century Schools, I see stuff from CIP, it tends to have a plan in terms of this is how we expect to spend down. What I got from you just articulated was, there's needs. Was there any way we can see those needs?
Okay, we can provide that.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, is that sorry, this is Christian. Is that going to be incorporated into the board letter, or is this going to be something to expected before? I just want to make sure.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have the actual, we don't have the $1.5 million where the $750,000 is actually just the earmark number in the event that we have to go to that. We don't have the actual money to perform all this work. It's just to prepare us in the event additional supplemental funding comes from the state, the city, environmental components, the outdoor living space, and such of that nature. It's just to be ready for the need with the additional funding. But I could basically identify the City College property, the what schools we're going to be remarking with new lines, and they call them tick marks. So on the actual individual lanes, I could do that.
Thanks, Blaine. Like I said, I just want to make sure, just again, when to expect it. That's all.
Thanks,
Okay.
Blaine. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. I think that is all for you, Mr. Coleman.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You have a good day.
You too. Mr. Gant, is there anyone present for public comment?
No.
All right. Well, I think that concludes today's operation meeting. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to my colleagues, Commissioner Bardema and Commissioner
Thank
Reed.
you.
Have an amazing rest of your Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.